Joseph Gutnick, shalom.
Shalom.
A businessman, philanthropist, and the shaliach, the emissary of the late Lubavitcher Rebbe for shlemut haaretz, integrity of the land of Israel. First of all, a few words about that important role, the shaliach of the Rebbe, but not just to another location in the world, rather with an assignment. Tell us about that.
This was in 1990 when there was the Targil HaMasriach, when Shamir and Prime Minister Shamir and Prime Minister Peres were vying with each other to form a government, and the Rabbi was very much for a Memshalat Tzara v'Chazaka. So he sent me at that time
a right-wing government.
A right-wing government, but a strong right-wing government, and he sent me at that time to do whatever I could to ensure that should happen. So I stayed in Israel one time for 3 months, one time for 4 months. Interestingly, my wife were having twins at that time, and I wanted to go back to Australia. So the Rabbi said they can manage very well. She could manage very well without me. So I was there.
It's important for him that you would stay there in Israel. And what did it
lobby?
And what would you do? I mean, you're coming from Australia. You're coming from Chabad. You know, some Israelis will say, "What are you interfering?" Give us a taste of what happened there.
Oh, well, plenty of people did criticise me, both in Australia and from other parts. What's someone coming from Australia and interfering in the politics in Israel, especially the late Shimon Peres was quite annoyed with me, and we had a lot of vikuchim, we had a lot of arguments about it, but that was my mission, and that's the Rebbe appointed, and as you know, as a Chassid of Chabad, you don't argue with the Rebbe, you just follow his command. And why he picked me, and I was young at the time, I was 33 years old, and that you have to ask him. We don't ask why he did this and why that. He told me that I have to follow his instructions, and I had hundreds of answers from him, and I don't speak in the name of Chabad. I'll make that very clear. I was appointed by the Rebbe to speak in his name, and I don't create policies for Chabad, but I acted on his direction, and I lobbied. I went to speak to, I was very close with, at that time, with Prime Minister Shamir, and with all the Chavrei HaKnesset, with Arik Sharon, and I went back and forward and tried my best to, the Moshe Gdolei HaTorah, to enforce that there should be a Memshalat Tzara v'Chazaka, and there was in the end.
So we got to politics already, and let me ask you about a very interesting, unique campaign, which some say even gave Netanyahu the victory back in 1996. And the campaign was Netanyahu Tov LeYehudim. Netanyahu is good for the Jews. First of all, tell us what was behind that campaign.
Oh, it was very much in line with the Rabbi's views. My shlichut continued, my mission continued after the Rabbi passed away. The Rabbi told me to continue, and that was the main thing he wanted from me as one of my duties to fulfill for him as a shliach. And at that time that was necessary. If God forbid Shimon Peres would have been elected as Prime Minister today, probably we would have a Palestinian state.
Wow, so the Rebbe was very clear about who he preferred as the Prime Minister of Israel.
It wasn't a matter of individuals, it was a matter of which government would be in power to ensure that no land was compromised, no policies of government should be compromised, and there shouldn't be a Palestinian state.
Now, we'll get back to a few stories really about the Rebbe and the amazing, how much he was connected to what's happening here in Israel, not just blessing, not just supporting, but really connected. But I want to take you to these days, and I understand that just like back then you were involved in politics, some see that word as problematic, but that's really how we create what goes on here in Israel. Also nowadays, you've been meeting who so far?
Well, I've met everyone that I want to meet with, that I should meet with. I've met with the Prime Minister Netanyahu, the past Prime Minister. I've met with Ayelet Shaked. I've met with the Defense Minister. I've met with Itamar Ben Gvir. I've met with Smotrich. So I've met with all I believe are on the right.
So would you agree that nowadays it's much more challenging, let's say, to define right, left, like it was back then where you could just say Netanyahu is good for the Jews?
yes, it is more difficult, but there's still those lines of division between those that are prepared to create a Palestinian state and those that are prepared to compromise and those that are prepared to give away land to those that are strongly against it and those that are not so strongly against it. So I look at it from that point of view, which is better for the integrity of state of Israel and which are not better for the state of Israel.
So you probably ask yourself, maybe you have an answer, what would the Rebbe say about the previous government, about Naftali Bennett, about Ayelet Shaked today? What are your thoughts?
The Rebbe was not for a Memshalat Achdut. He was not for a unity government. The Rebbe wanted a right-wing, strong government, a narrow government that was a definite, had scores of answers in that regard, and the Rebbe's view wouldn't have changed. He would not have been happy with forming a government with representatives from the Arab community who are against the state of Israel and may not be our friends. On the other hand, someone like Ayelet Shaked, who I'm a strong supporter of, who disappointed all of the supporters, I'm still a supporter. I still believe her heart is in the right place, and I still believe that she may make a difference in this election, although there are a lot of people who would disagree with me. But if you look at it from the political point of view, she could make a massive difference, and I think she should be supported. And
you could say that again, so kind of
yeah.
nice. I think she should be. Just a second.
I think she should be supported. Not that I endorse anything that she's done in the past, but you have to give someone a chance to prove themselves again. And I believe that she would be loyal to the right this time. But that's an issue that some people will disagree with me. And let's see what happens in the coming weeks and months.
And how do you see Itamar Ben Gvir, who some years ago, not long ago, defined as the most radical that there is, and we see that the left and even some of the center say that they will never form a government with him, and now he's, he may be even a minister if Netanyahu does what he promised, and you never know about that.
Well, I've met with him. I don't find him as a radical. I'm not a radical. I'm born in Australia. I'm open-minded. And I don't see him as a racist. I see him as very strong views that are good for the state of Israel. Living in Australia, I know people who are afraid to come to Israel because of the present security issues that exist in Israel. And I think that he will be a great support for if Benjamin Netanyahu is elected again as Prime Minister, or anyone from the right, that he'll be a great support. And I think I don't agree with his actions in regards to the Makam HaMikdash, in regards to the place of the temple, but he has other views that make sense, and if he wants security in the state of Israel, I think he should be listened to.
Now, we mentioned the Netanyahu is good for the Jews campaign, but how do you respond to those who say, from the right, that in the past 12 years of Netanyahu's leadership, we saw many uprooting of communities. We saw not enough action regarding what goes on in the Negev and the Bedouins and the takeover of areas of the land of Israel. We've seen not enough action in terms of the legal system. And some in the right, let's say from Yamina, say that Netanyahu didn't do good enough and there needs to be some sort of change.
I think that he's done a good job. Of course, there's lots of... it says that Mordechai was Rotzu l'roi v'echav v'loi kelechav. You can't satisfy everybody. He did things that he made mistakes, but everyone's human. But there's a lot of good that he achieved. He made Israel into a strong economic country. He was able to walk between the raindrops in dealing with President Obama. And he's been able to work with the Arabs and the Abraham Accords without not necessarily creating a Palestinian state. So he's a diplomatic genius, and I think that we haven't got anyone better than him at the moment.
And some thought that after he left the Prime Minister's office, he'd go and go to business or something. But you've met him. He's out there to stay. How have you been? We were impressed by meeting him.
He's very resilient. He's very determined, and he thinks and believes that he is the right person to bring Israel out of the threats that exist at the present moment, especially Iran and other threats that he gets. And I suppose he's the most experienced, and I believe that he's the best man for the job at the moment.
Let's go back to really the time that you were familiar and close with the Rebbe. He was very active in terms of helping you and assisting you and supporting and guiding you in your business, actually, right?
He was very, very involved, and of course, he gives me the inspiration to continue. I'm not a young man anymore, but I've got the energy because of him of a 35-year-old, the same as was when I first came to Israel, both in my business and both in my efforts for Shlemut Haaretz. I was one of the largest gold producers in Australia in the 90s, and now I've made massive, significant discoveries of critical minerals used in electrical vehicles and batteries, which is the new gold and diamonds of the 21st century, and I attribute that all to the blessings of the Rabbi.
What was it about? Was just spiritual blessing, or it was also understanding? We see in the video here that he's asking questions and understanding it. How do you look at it when you remember these meetings with the Rebbe and explaining to him what you're doing and raising issues?
Well, it was a great merit. You know, why he chose me and why he got involved, you'd have to ask him. But, you know, every moment I had with him and every letter I had from him was very precious. And I hope that I don't let him down. I hope that I'll be able to achieve whatever I can for Shlemut Haaretz, and I hope that I'll be the wealthy man that he wanted me to be, and to help other institutions, not only Chabad institutions, that help the Mitnachlim and help the Jewish world.
Okay, so let's end with what's next. What is on your agenda?
Well, let's hope that the new Prime Minister will be once again Rabbi Netanyahu. Let's hope that Ayelet Shaked will also get elected and pass the number of votes that she needs.
By the way, do you think you could convince Netanyahu not to go out against her, or did you raise her name when you met her?
That's, you know, between discussions between the two of us, but that's how I see the political map at the moment. Not looking at personalities, but to be able to form a government that's 61 or 62 or 63 and have a Memshalat Sarva Chazaka, to have a strong, narrow right-wing government like the Rabbi wanted, that doesn't compromise, that will be against the Palestinian state, will not give away any land, will not compromise with dealings with the Arabs. I think that's the best.
And you're saying that government doesn't need to call in after it becomes a stable, narrow, right-wing government. Also elements like Kachol Lavan. You met Defense Minister Gantz.
Yeah, I find him as a very nice man, and I don't think he fits into the framework of how I'm talking now. He's doing a good job as Defense Minister, and I've got no strong criticism of him, but he hasn't got the views of the right. He's centre-left. Mm-hmm. And that's something we see what will happen later on. But as I say, the Rabbi was for a narrow right-wing government. Once you bring in other parties, and then there have to be compromises, and you can't go and have a strong government if you've got other elements there that you have to depend on them to form the government.
Okay, Rabbi Joseph Gutnick, businessman, philanthropist, and shliach of the Rebbe for Shlemut Haaretz, the integrity of Israel. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.